Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Dungeons and Dopamine. Da-da.
Hi, welcome to Dungeons and Dopamine. I'm Bree.
I'm Jess.
And this is episode 50.
That's insane.
So insane.
So-
We're like almost on a year here.
2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks from now will be, well, okay,
4
theoretically.
weeks from now.
Yeah.
Because we're recording in the past.
And also,
or the future.
we're almost sure that we released a bonus episode as an
right.
numbered episode, so we might be a week behind.
Mm-hmm.
But because we have not prepared, 2 weeks, man.
Right.
It's blowing my brain up.
Crazy.
So we have
And we didn't miss any weeks,
not one.
which we deserve a medal just for that.
For real. We should probably take ourselves out to dinner.
Yes, absolutely.
A Dungeons and Dopa dinner.
Yes.
I'm not sorry. I was going to say things, and they're gone. So, goodbye, things.
Because we spent a half hour talking before we started talking.
And my brain is
so...
So, this is going to be so good. This episode is going to be amazing.
It's going to be the best.
There can't be anything worse than last week, because last week I'm pretty sure was the first time I ever podcasted ever.
I felt like that last week too, but in a different episode than you, so it worked out really great.
So I have a talking point.
Yes.
Have you heard online the man v. bear debate?
I was getting ready to look it up when you said you were going to use it as a talking point. So I have not looked it up yet. I have the basic idea, but it sounded sad to me, so I decided not to look it up.
It's not like a happy thing, really, but... And I posted something about it today, and Ryan was like, I don't understand what this is. And I'm like, just let me explain it to you a little bit. So the idea is that someone went online and asked women, would you rather confront a bear in the forest or a man in the forest or on a street? I don't know where the man is, but he's a man. And women overwhelmingly said bear.
100%.
Yep.
I mean,
men are furious about this.
of course
They are incensed, if you will. And so there is a ton out there right now of like, well, after the bear attacks me, if I survive, the people around me won't ask me what I was wearing, or if I egged the bear on, or make me sit at the dinner table with the bear.
And they'll believe you.
They will believe me.
The one I saw was, at least if I was attacked by a bear, people would believe me.
Yeah. And men cannot understand this. And so on TikTok, there's a huge plethora of videos of like men harassing women and women saying, please leave me alone, and men still following him, sitting in a cafe, and they'll pull out their phone and start recording because this man walked up and is trying to converse with her while she's trying to read, work, whatever, and he won't leave her alone.
Yep.
Bears don't do that.
I mean, I don't want to confront a grizzly bear in the woods, but when I went to Tennessee and they told us if we were going to be hiking, if we ran into any black bears, the way to scare off a black bear is to treat it like it's a cat, and you just get really big and you yell a lot and like wave your arms, and that scares bears away.
Yep.
That does not scare men away.
Nope. Although we could try it. Maybe it would.
I'm going to start doing that when I get approached. I'm just going to make myself look really big and go,
But
wacky waving arm
inflatable
Yes.
tube man. We should have
Style.
Christina do that sometime on the show.
We'll
can
just
do the whole
record her as a sound bite, and we'll just throw it into random episodes.
It can be our commercial. We'll have to start flailing arm man, inflatable tube man.
Yes.
Emporium.
Mm-hmm.
Those were a lot
You
of
can
words.
buy those on
I know,
Amazon.
right? You can buy miniature ones.
People
I
are
think Ryan
using
has
them
one.
as yard guards for chickens.
Yeah.
Because they keep the scarier birds away.
Yes, I've seen that. I would. Absolutely.
That's my next plan when I get my new flock of chickens.
So, yeah, bear. I mean, even
I think it's hilarious that men are upset about that.
Oh, I'm so, like, and it's the...
hilarious
like,
in the way, like, I don't want to think about the seriousness of it.
Right.
So...
It's insane. I mean, and the fact that men would be mad about that, how dare you? How dare you have an opinion about it?
Right. How dare you feel unsafe around strange men?
Yeah. And
Have
it's
you
like
met
that,
strange men?
but not all men. But how can you tell until it's too late?
Mm-hmm. And from experience...
It's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. I mean, it's really just entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
Men have been used to getting their way for many, many years, and they just don't seem to understand that maybe we don't want to talk to them.
Yeah.
Or maybe we don't want to talk to anybody. Like, just leave me alone. I'm here to do work, or I'm on my way to do something. My time is not yours just by default.
Yeah, it doesn't belong. I don't owe you anything.
Mm-hmm.
I am allowed to tell you to go away and expect you to listen. How would you like it if a man approached you and did that to you?
And then didn't let it go.
Yeah. So yeah, bear.
I would
and
choose the bear as well.
everyone else can just shut up about it.
We win. You lose.
Final words. That sounds ominous.
We made it to episode 50, and these are our final words.
These are your final
Man
words.
versus bear. The end.
Who wins? And then I'm like, Brie, we have to go outside, and there's bears that we have to fight. I already anticipate we're dying. So.
We're just gonna cut it off here, guys.
We're gonna say, love ya, thanks for everything. I'll tell my kid I love her whenever you see her. So, I don't remember what your topic is, so I don't remember how to transition.
Do you know...
Dogman, Michigan, I win.
Good job.
Podcast over.
Dogman of Michigan also likes the Morrigan.
Yes!
So a few
Another
weeks
folklore.
ago, I don't even remember what we were talking about. Probably we were talking about books. It might have even been a bonus episode. We were talking
Probably.
about books. And the Morrigan in Sarah J. Maas in Aquitar came up. And this is not the first time the Morrigan has come up in our podcast. I don't remember what the other ones were. And this is not the first time the Morrigan has come up in my life. So
it was a sign.
Whole podcast episode about her. Of course, because all books have to relate back to Kevin Hearn. The Morrigan does appear in 3 different series of books that I have read recently. So I'm going to start with those and then talk a little bit about, the Morrigan and all the background there, and then kind of how it relates back to the characters in the books. So the first one, and I don't know if I've ever told you about this book, but it's actually another one of my favorites. And the author is Christopher Moore, who is hilarious, and he writes a lot of kind of dark satire. Other books written by Christopher Moore include, it's called A Dirty Job, and then it has a second book called Secondhand Souls. And this is a book, it's a widower, a very strange man. He owns and runs a thrift shop that I believe he inherited from his dad. And shortly after his wife dies, he is given a book called The Big Book of Dead, and he realizes that he is the new Grim Reaper.
Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt, except I have a family member who's having a very big surgery coming up soon, and keeps seeing a man with like sunken eyes and long black hair and keeps saying it's grim. And I'm like, maybe you should reconsider this surgery.
Maybe there are too many signs.
They said that Grim drove past them and then drove past again, but this time wearing a baseball hat. And I was on the phone with them and they said, I can see right through your disguise. Just put your hood on. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Thank you for that. So in A Dirty Job, a man named, I think his name is Charlie, who also has a little girl like a 2-year-old named Sophie, finds out that he's the new Grim Reaper. And he has like a community of people, and he has to figure out all the new ins and outs of his new lifestyle. And
this is like the Santa Claus,
it
grimmer.
Kinda is.
Grimmer.
Quite literally. He ends up with hellhounds that protect his daughter. It's just beautiful. There are taxidermied animals that come back to life. And the villain of the story is the Morrigan. And in this book, and as we talk later, I think this is probably going to be the most realistic, or the most closest to the lore of the Morrigan.
Okay.
So in A Dirty Job and Secondhand Souls, the Morrigan actually consists of 3 different entities, which is Bab, Macha, and Nieman. They're Celtic war deities, and they can shapeshift to be beautiful women, old hags, or like these creepy crow monsters that scream, and they're trying to essentially like capture the souls before the new Grim Reaper can help the soul. And then in, of course, Sarah J. Maas in the ACOTAR books, we have the Morrigan. We have Morrigan as a main character. She's in the inner circle, and she is Rhysand's cousin and his third in command. She's the daughter of basically the steward that's running the Court of Nightmares, or like the family that used to be in control of the whole night court now just keeps up appearances running the Court of Nightmares. They are completely awful people and did awful things to Morrigan, so she hates them. She spends as much time away from them as possible.
She's good.
Yes,
in the book.
Yes,
yeah,
because she's in the inner circle. She's very loyal. She's great. She's always very friendly to Feyre, even in the beginning when they don't know each other. In ACOTAR, Morrigan is unmarried and unpartnered during our stories, but we learn through a conversation with Feyre.
Spoiler alert.
Yes.
Sorry.
Good
okay,
job.
go on.
We learn through a conversation with Feyre she does secretly prefer women, but somehow in ACOTAR world that is like she still can't come out to her friends and family, so she's just spent 500 years like living in secret and leading Azrael on.
Yeah.
We know that she does at least like men because she lost her virginity to Cassian to avoid an arranged marriage.
And spend some fun time with Helion. More than once, from what it sounds like.
Yep. She is a fierce warrior and very, very powerful. Rhysand implies she is a secret weapon of some sort that he will call in as a last resort on the battlefield. But it's very vague through the book still on what her actual powers are. We know that she can winnow. We know she has the power of pure truth, but we don't really know what that means.
And we don't see a lot of any of her powers.
She kind of implies to the queens that they know that that what she's saying is truth because she has the power of truth, but we also know she can lie because, I mean, she's been hiding her sexuality for 500 years.
Right,
so
right.
I think obviously there's a lot to come in her story. And then, of course, my favorite, Mr. Kevin Hearn, in his Iron Druid Chronicles. She is in all of the Iron Druid Chronicle books. She is a Celtic goddess that appears both as a beautiful Irish woman and as a crow with scary red eyes. She has a very fiery temper and can do all kinds of druid magic. She has the druid tattoos just like Atticus does in the story. She is also the chooser of the slain during battles, so she knows who's going to win these battles. She can in these books she's at odds with Breed, who is considered the ruler of the faith. The Morrigan gets a little bloodlusty or just plain lusty over war and is a little kinky, but also has some sort of like healing sex magic. So that's kind of cool. But then there's also scenes where she like makes love on the battlefield because war is her thing. So she's a little strange.
She would love my topic that's coming.
Right? She is, especially from those books, she's just one of my favorite morally gray characters. And I don't want to, I mean, I could talk a whole episode about her just in the Iron Druid Chronicles, but I decided not to because you're reading them and I don't want to give anything away.
Thank you.
But she is in all of the books.
I want to point out that I'm not that slow of a reader. I just also have soup brain lately.
I get it. I have not. So the Morrigan, in just general history, folklore, she is mostly an Irish or Celtic goddess, but there is some theories that she actually predates Celtic religion because so I don't think it was Stonehenge. I think it was one of the Stonehenge in Ireland that I talked about.
Okay, yeah. Not the Michigan Stonehenge.
Right. The whatever one I talked about in Ireland, I think that one actually has a reference to the Morrigan, which would predate even Celtic history or the folklore of Celtic history. But mostly she's associated with the Celtic Irish history. She is a goddess of war, destiny, and fertility. I also saw fate. She's a goddess of fate. She's a goddess of spite. She's a goddess of strife. So there's a lot of different theories.
She's carrying
there.
a lot of cups.
She really is. And there just seems to be a lot of confusion over the lore. So she is seen both as a single individual, but also as three sisters. And some of it had to do with translations, and then some of it is just different cultures and how they put her stories together. She is a shapeshifter in all of the stories and often appears as a crow or a raven. She is part of the Tuatha De Danann, who are the folk of the goddess Danu, which is the mother, or the goddess of nature and mother and all the things in the Irish lore. The word Morrigan may either mean the Phantom Queen or the Great Queen, which I thought was very interesting.
And both, great doesn't always mean great, good. So
could just be powerful.
Yeah.
She is known to be able to predict the outcome of battle or influence the outcome of battle. And she could also increase the emotions that occurred during battle. So she was great as getting people excited and ramped up and maybe ready to go.
That second wind that you would need on a battlefield.
So she could influence the battle by just getting people excited and ramped up and reinvigorated. She had the ability to make people feel more brave or really feel like they needed to solve these issues. She also she's always associated with, like I said, fate or prophecy or augury. So in the Iron Druid books, it's always birds.
She clears out a lot of pipes.
Yes.
No. I'm sorry. I'll go.
In Iron Druid Chronicles, she uses birds to tell the future. But druids also use they called it sticks and bones and stones, I think, and it's just sticks and rocks and how they fall.
I literally pictured bones.
I mean,
like chicken bones.
It probably
kind of a thing.
was at some point. She is sometimes, like I said, she's sometimes associated also with protection, fertility, nature, and life. And then as the triple goddess, so that's all the Morrigan as an individual. As a triple goddess, she is often portrayed as a trio of three sisters. And as mentioned before, we've got Bab and Matcha, which are brought up in the Secondhand Souls and the Dirty Job books. But in all of the lore, it kind of gets confusing on whether the three sisters are the Morrigan altogether, or if the Morrigan is one of the three sisters. So it could be that it's Bab, Matcha, and the Morrigan, but sometimes it's Bab, Matcha, and Anand, or Neiman.
That's almost Manon. I wonder if that's why it's pronounced that way.
Could be.
Are you?
I don't. We're going to talk about it.
Sneaky.
We're going to talk about it. So even in those stories, sometimes they interact as three separate sisters, and sometimes they, the three sisters become one entity to become this goddess, the Morrigan. There was some theory that the triple goddess thing is really just because the Irish and Celtic religion and culture focused on numbers of three.
Okay.
The Triskelly and everything has got the three sides. So it could have, religion through the years can change depending on who's in control of it. And it might have started as, the Morrigan was just one person, but since the Irish like threes, they made her into a triple goddess. There are also some similarities between the Morrigan and the Valkyries.
Ooh.
So the Valkyries are from the Norse pantheon, and then the Morrigan would be the Celtic pantheon. But they are both seen as goddesses or warriors that choose who is slain in battle and also can interfere with battle. So the Valkyries tend to use like magic, they said magic fetters, where they could magically grab your arm while you were in the midst of battle and cause you to
I don't like that.
mess up.
Unless they're on my side.
Well, yeah. According to Celtic scholar Patrick K. Ford, mythological women like the Valkyries and the Morrigan represent the full circle of life. They had the power to give life by giving birth and take it away by choosing who would die on the battlefield. Thus, it was natural for female figures to know the fates of men, which I just thought was an awesome quote. There are also later connections to the Morrigan and Banshees, which is the loud screaming, crazy things, which relates heavily to the Morrigan in the Dirty Job books. And there's also some theories that connect the Morrigan and Morgan Le Fay, who I believe was the sister to King Arthur. And apparently she was also known as a shapeshifter and a prophet.
Interesting.
Now,
so, wait. All I know about King Arthur is the sword and the stone.
So, that is the Morrigan. Now, going back, obviously I already connected it to a Dirty Job quite a bit. But if we go back to, and I'm not going to talk about Kevin Hearn and the Morrigan in there because it'll give away stories for you. But going back to Sarah J. Maas. So now we have the Morrigan. We don't know what her powers really are in the ACOTAR books. But we know now that Maas has been known to use Celtic imagery in her books. She I believe Tamlin is also a Celtic name.
Okay.
From an old Celtic god, maybe? I don't remember the whole story on that one. So we can kind of assume that there may be some connections between her Morrigan and the real Morrigan. And we have a connection between the Morrigan and the Valkyries now, which is Nesta. So Nesta starts the Valkyries when she's in the Nesta book.
Do the Valkyries of this folklore have the flying horses, or is that just like a...
They do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was thinking, like, for the movie, did they just add that for funsies? Or...
Nope. They, I believe, the Valkyries used the flying horses. And then we also have, so the Morrigan is a triple goddess, and we have the connection to Manon and the, what do they call her a triple goddess? Their queen?
Well, they call her
or
the three-faced goddess or something like that. Yes. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So that would then connect ACOTAR to
Throne of Glass.
Yes. Sorry.
That's dangerous.
So I'm so sorry. I am very excited about the tie-in, and maybe Mama Maas is leading us down this road.
She has to be, right?
Why else?
Why else would you tie in such a big character?
The Morrigan is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
And even, like, Kevin Hearn still, even though he takes his own liberties with who the Morrigan is in his stories, she's still pretty close to what would typically fall within the Celtic lore. And same with A Dirty Job. Those were very, very true to some of the history and the lore. I just feel like there has to, especially because we haven't been given much information on, like, what her powers are and what she can do.
Vague.
But so can she influence battles?
Well,
and does she know ahead of time who's going to die?
Did she ever mention anything about them being on the battlefield or anything? Like, did she ever...
It's referenced that she fought in the First War because she talks to the queens, and they didn't know her, but they had heard stories of the Morrigan. And Rhysand's comments about how she's one of the most powerful, and she's like his last resort. I think the line is something like, if Cassian and Azrael fall, then I call in the Morrigan. So is it because she can influence battles?
It really
is it because she could choose who dies? Is it because she can predict the future? There's just so much there. And now we know there's going to be a traitor. Is it and she has been spending all this time away from the inner circle. It's just...
It really bothers me not to know.
We're really going to need more information, Sarah J. Maas.
We need you to hurry up. I guess I have to talk now.
If you want to.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
So I did Michigan, obviously. We're still in Michigan. But I needed a break from hauntings because sometimes I freak myself out and can't sleep good.
Just not sure you handled this correctly.
I'm sure you've made the right choices in life.
I couldn't sleep, so I did something creepier.
It is creepier too. So let's just do this. Let's crack in. That was that's why we drink reference.
I thought it was a Kraken reference.
I
was gonna start talking about Kevin Hearn again.
Pretend that it was. That's so much cooler.
Yeah. That could be our new transition.
And I got so excited in my Kraken episode. I'm out today. I'm soup brain. So, you want to hear something awful?
Mm-hmm.
Michigan has lost approximately 425 people to serial killers from 1992 to 2019.
What?
And it's in like the top 10 of highest amount of people in that time frame. Not people, states in that time frame that have lost people.
So when you started that sentence, I was like, 475 people isn't so bad. I feel like we should be winning. And then you mentioned the time frame, and now I'm concerned.
Yeah, ditto. Ohio is still worse, so I mean we're still
no surprise there.
Winning. And California was the highest. New York was in there above us and things like that. I mean, per capita, obviously those are gonna be. It is wildly high. If you compare the size and the how spread out people in Michigan are compared to, like, say, New York, or the bigger city states. Yeah, that makes sense, right?
Yes, those bigger city states.
And the horrible thing is that Michigan has had a lot of serial killers born, raised, or reside here for a chunk of their lives.
Huh.
But the most notorious that I found, and by literally googling soup, googling what's the most notorious Michigan serial killer. So really, I brought this all on myself. True. And to all of you. I'm sorry.
You must suffer with us.
But the most notorious is John Norman Collins. He was born in 1947 in Canada, which, I mean, at least, right? Like, at least he wasn't...
We didn't born him.
We did not make John Norman Collins. We made Kid Rock. And Kevin Nash. He is, like, the story goes for people like this. He grew up with a pretty crappy life. He was abandoned by his father shortly after he was born. His mother had a really brief second marriage, and then his third stepfather, his mother's third marriage, was an abusive alcoholic.
Okay. So he's got some excuses.
A little bit, yeah. His mother did leave the third guy when John was 9. But that's a lot of marriages. In a
short
and I
childhood.
Feel like by 9, you've got some set tendencies. Like it's hard to reverse behaviors after like elementary age, which 9 is still elementary age, but you know what I mean.
Barely.
So finding information on his very early life was pretty tricky, aside from those little few facts. But when he got into high school, he started dating. He was apparently in sports. He was in clubs. He was described by his teachers as being polite and quiet. However, his girlfriends that he dated said that he was fairly violent or angry, and that he was absolutely repulsed by a woman on her period.
Of course.
Yep. He went to college in Eastern Michigan University in 1966. He had been at Central University for a little while, or, Central Michigan University for a while, but left to go to EMU and major in teaching upper elementary school. Thank God he never made it there. Right. Spoiler alert. But we got to look at the positives in this story because they're few and far between. He participated in sports on campus and was part of a fraternity until they booted him. Specifically, it said they asked him to leave. Apparently, he was stealing from his housemates.
So lots of creepy tendencies. so
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, and a lot of that sociopath behavior where he's like fooling a lot of people, but then peeking out the psychotic things a
Right.
little bit. I should have worded that better because I actually talked about sociopath and psychopath, but here I am combining them.
That was like 45 weeks ago.
Right. I cannot be held accountable for that. And there were like goblins. So really.
Right.
Anyway, so the professors said that he was a really quick student and he was a good student, but his work started to decline in the second half of his sophomore year. And he should have graduated. Soup. He should have graduated in 1969, but he was 24 credits short. And they said it just seemed like he was in no hurry to graduate. Like, it didn't bother him that he wasn't graduated. And I would suspect he's one of those that really enjoyed the college lifestyle. This is just rough. I'm sorry. He was aggressive and angry toward women, as we kind of already talked about. He was impatient and loud with his college girlfriends. He would express a belief that if his ideologies, I guess would be a good way to say it, was that if a man wanted to kill, he should, and that it was okay because he wanted to.
Oh, that's
why,
all.
Why
That's
would
all
we
he
choose
needs.
the bear?
Yeah.
And then he also said that a man who killed without guilt would never be caught because he didn't feel guilty. I read an article, really actually amazing website, mail.crimelibrary.org. And I'm going to read directly what it said because I think it sums up some of his behavior really nicely. A girl who had said she'd met a man that looked like Collins, John, when he accosted her from his car, remembered him saying that he couldn't stand girls with pierced ears because they left holes that defile their bodies. He also told a tale of having strangled a cat with a length of clothesline, and to make his point, he started to put his hands around the girl's throat, scaring her.
I got no words for this one. Like every red flag. Check.
Tick,
Check.
tick, tick.
Tortured animals.
Yep.
Awful childhood. Doesn't like women. Overly aggressive.
Played sports and impressed other people.
Charming.
Another co-ed, this is another story. Another co-ed recalled riding with him near some wooded area when they stopped to rest under a tree. He asked her if she would be scared if he was the co-ed killer. Another spoiler alert, that is what the murderer will later go on to be called. Surprise! She could be the next victim, he said, being there alone with him. She thought he was kidding, but the serious expression on his face made her very uneasy. Whew. All right, so on August 7th of 1967, things begin. Two 15-year-old boys found the naked body of a 19-year-old woman who turned out to be Mary Therese Flesar. She had last been seen walking toward her apartment by a neighbor who said she was approached by someone in a Chevy, kind of a silver blue Chevy. She spoke with the driver a few times. Each time the interaction ended with her shaking her head no and then walking away. And then the driver was persistent and came back. When she was examined, and I'm sorry, this is where it gets kind of gory. She was examined, she had been stabbed 30 times. Her feet had been severed just above the ankle. Her thumb and sections of the fingers on one hand were missing, and one forearm had been severed from her body. The severed appendages never were found. I have no idea.
Ooh.
The examiner could tell she had also been brutally beaten before her death, and that the body had been moved 3 times before being discovered. At the funeral home, a man claiming to be sent by her parents asked to take pictures of her for them. He was denied several times by the lady at the front desk, and he finally left, getting into a silver blue Chevy. She also said he had no camera.
I'm glad she was intelligent and
Right?
noticed things.
Right. Yeah, by the way, it was weird. He just didn't have a camera either. I mean, good on her, because
And it's
that's
way
weird.
before the time of cell phones. It's
Yeah,
not like he had it in
yeah.
his pocket.
Right, yeah, exactly. Ugh. So 1 year later, the body of 20-year-old Joan Elspeth Shell was found lying in the grass. She had been raped. Her throat was slashed, and she had been stabbed 25 times. Her skirt had also been wrapped around her throat. She had last been seen traveling to see her boyfriend, and she had missed the bus, and so she decided to hitchhike. Her friend had tried to convince her not to get in the car with these men, and she still did, and that was the last time she was seen. John claimed to have been visiting his mother at the time because amongst witnesses who had kind of noticed this girl and stuff, someone talked about a guy that looked like him, but he claimed he was visiting his mother, who was in a different part of Michigan at that point, and they just believed him.
Of course. He seemed like a stand-up guy.
Right.
Why would they question him?
In March of 1969, Muskegon native, which I hate, Jane Louise Mixer was found dead. She was 23 years old and had, before this, posted a note on a bulletin board looking for a ride to come back to Muskegon to tell her family about her new engagement. She was shot with a pistol twice and garroted with a nylon stocking that did not belong to her. She had not been assaulted, but was found with her nylons down around her thighs and with a pad. Like she had been menstruating at the time of her death.
Which is disgusting.
Absolutely. Yep. So the murder has kind of a different MO from the last, but with her student status and tying the garment around her neck, the nylons, and the proximity of her abduction and murder, the investigators tentatively linked her with the other two women, but it was kind of a could be, maybe isn't kind of thing.
And that could, it could have been someone else. It could have been that he was in a hurry.
Exactly. And the gunshot was new. What's up with that? It's much less personal than the others. But so brace yourself. These ones were wildly unpleasant, but they get worse from here.
Oh, good.
So bear with me. I know, right? Okay. 8 months and a few hundred yards from where and when Joan Shell had been found, another crime scene was found. This one was a 16-year-old girl. Her name was Marilyn Skeleton, which, by the way, can we just say badass name?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to belittle her at all. That was cool. The crime scene of this one was so angry.
Oh.
There was so much blood. There was so much trauma to this girl. She'd been killed by blunt force trauma to her head and her face. She was also tortured and treated wildly cruelly before her death. She had been known for drug use, and she had been hitchhiking before this event, which I only mention because I don't want to slander this poor girl, but I only mention it because despite those things, she was still connected to John and his killings. We're getting there. The fifth victim was last seen walking home with a friend who said that they had parted ways about 5 blocks from her home. Her name was Dawn Louise Bassam. She was 13 years old. She was also beaten and tortured. There was no definitive evidence that she was assaulted, which I'm going to take as a no. She was 13 years old. She was not. So, evidence from this crime scene led the police to the scene of her actual murder. The body had been moved again. All of these bodies were moved. All of these bodies did end up having something tied around their neck.
Okay.
And all of these bodies, when they were checked over by the coroners or whatever, had something in their mouths and throats that would have been there to stop their screaming.
Okay.
Gag them.
Mm-hmm.
So this led them to the basement of a local farmhouse. And unfortunately, there was nothing much more there than this. 1 week after Dawn's murder, 3 teenage boys found the partially naked body of a woman. She had been stabbed, brutalized, and shot. She had been sexually assaulted. And when she was finally identified, she was identified as Alice Elizabeth Colomb. She was 21 years old and was a U of M graduate. This murder was kind of the one that tied everything together as far as the MOs because of the gunshot. So, I mean, obviously at this point, people were getting wildly freaked out, which, yep. The news...
As they should.
Exactly. The news started calling this the Michigan murders, or the co-ed killings, or and referring to the murderer as the Michigan murderer or the co-ed killer. The reward for the killer was $42,000 at this point, which nowadays is $351,400.
Thank you for including that.
Absolutely. I'm not allowed not to. I am going to read a little bit of a snippet straight from Wiki. By July 1969, as a result of the coordinated investigation into the killings, more than 1,000 convicted sex offenders had been investigated and eliminated as suspects. Over 800 tips from informants had been actively investigated, and several thousand individuals routinely interviewed. Although Washtenaw County Sheriff Douglas Harvey conceded at a press conference that same month that the investigators had little physical evidence to act upon and that the perpetrator had yet to make a serious error. He was adamant about the fact that the murderer was still at large due to pure luck and not for lack of police effort, which is... It wouldn't make me feel much better.
Right.
Like, we're trying really hard, but there's still a murderer. Well, that's the only sentence.
But it's not because he's good at it. It's just because he's lucky.
He's lucky, and police are really trying hard. Like,
So you could still end up murdered. And
but
it's not because he's good at it. It's because your life sucks.
And it's not because of police, because we're trying.
We're trying, okay? Don't judge us.
I did think that was a lot of people to go through, though. I mean, that's a ton of people and a lot of information. And a lot of sex offenders, which is ew. But, all right, we can start to see some light at the end of this horrifying tunnel. I promise. Soon after all of this, Sue Beineman was reported missing by her roommate. She had last been seen going into a wig shop. After she was reported, 3 days later, she was found naked and face down on a wooded walkway. She had been beaten just as the others, but also burned, which was a new...
So he's escalating.
Yes. She died of strangulation. The police at this point were like, hey, we know this guy comes back a lot to move the bodies. She was where she had been murdered and was fairly, I mean, that to sound terrible, but was fairly fresh. So they called for a media blackout and crossed their fingers because they had tried this before and it didn't work. So called for a media blackout and replaced the body with a mannequin and did a stakeout. But the problem was a huge storm blew in and it rendered their radios completely useless. So they saw a man running through, near, and around the crime scene. Did I say campsite? Oh my god.
Now we're back to the camp books.
Yeah, this has all been a ploy for me to tie it back.
Actually, this wasn't a true story at all. It's just from the books.
Oh, yep.
I wish.
Exactly. So the guy got away because their radios weren't working. I feel like there has to be a lot more to that part of the story.
It feels like that happens in, like, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but not in real life.
Yeah.
Like, that's funny for a sitcom, but not for real life.
Right, and if you're seeing him run it, why aren't you following?
Right.
I mean...
Like, nobody was like, hey, somebody should go after that guy.
Like, I'm just gonna radio my buddy. Beep, beep. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot.
Radios are down. Let's go home, guys. It's like when the power flickers at work, and I'm like, the power's gonna go out. We can all go home.
Anyway,
just have to give up.
Thankfully, because of Karen's wig purchase, they actually still had some leads and a timeline of her day up to the murder. So that was really cool. They found the wig shop. The shopkeepers actually recognized the motorcycle that the last person she was seen with was driving. Now, one of the police deputies was a former frat member at the same place that John was a member and was asked to leave. So, This officer was a frat boy with John, but he had no love for him because, well, and hopefully he wouldn't have, kept his secret anyway. But he knew that the kind of motorcycle that the person had identified was the same kind of motorcycle that John drove. He also knew John was a big motorcycle enthusiast and that John had been, allegedly, but not allegedly, stealing tons of parts to keep his motorcycle running. So they also knew, because of the shopkeepers, that Karen had accepted a ride from a guy on the motorcycle. Blah, 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 blah. Stories started to emerge of John after all this kind of started coming out and people were looking for him, which is great. He seemed to have skedaddled a little bit. I don't know. It was very strange. A little shady on the timeline here, but he might have skedaddled a bit before I don't know, but maybe in that year that he didn't murder. I don't know. There was something weird. He skedaddled for a little bit to California. Part of the story. I am a great storyteller.
Necessary information.
You're gonna love it. So I kind of told you that a lot of people, for the most part, had a pretty good feel about John. But
he was charming.
Yeah. At this point, it was starting to unravel on him, which is lovely.
Yay, finally.
Exactly. I do want to read just a little description from Wiki. Some of this is what I have already talked about, but it sort of sums it up in more of a, I don't have the words to even talk about.
Which is why I'm going to read it.
Okay, so here I'm going to read this little snippet from Wiki because I think it's better words than I words.
They got better words than I
got no words. I got soup brain. Some acquaintances noted Colin's politeness around women, while others described him as lascivious and bad-tempered. He was also known to engage in sexual violence, including one instance in which he had raped a woman who had resisted his advance. Which, please excuse my language for a moment. After that, I wrote, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Because why wasn't he in jail?
Different times,
I know.
awful people.
Bear. I would choose a bear.
Imagine how many women could have lived if they would have just stopped him when he was a rapist.
Okay, anyway. So that was the end of the wiki. But John also, it turns out, delighted in sharing the stories and the gory details of all these murders with his coworkers. And he claims that his uncle, who happened to be the sheriff, was the one giving him all this detail. But his uncle, of course, denied this. And we have no reason to not trust the uncle. He was eventually ID'd by approximately 8 different witnesses. And 3 different women came forward stating he had tried to entice them onto his bike at one time or another. Finally, the hammer is coming down on this creep. In August, I'm sorry. There's one little fun, I guess, tidbit. When he was being accused of all of this, his uncle was on vacation and he was babysitting their house for them. And when his uncle returned, he noticed some missing items from the house, like laundry detergent and stuff. And also noticed that there was paint spots on the floor. And so he was told about John and their suspicions about him, and he went home, the sheriff, and scraped the paint off of the floor, and there were bloodstains under there. So he, of course, then went and told everybody, okay, yep, let's get this little punk off
my
the streets.
nephew.
Yeah, exactly. In August 1969, he was finally arraigned. He was arraigned for Karen's murder only. He was 1 year, almost to the day, found guilty for Karen's murder.
Yay.
He was sentenced to life. So for some reason, the stupid judge asked, would you like to say anything before you are taken away for the rest of your life? He said, I have 2 things to say. I think they, meaning the jury, conscientiously tried to give me a fair trial. The jury did not take its task lightly, but I think things were blown out of proportion. The circumstances surrounding this case prevented me from getting a fair trial. It was a travesty of justice that took place in this courtroom. I hope someday it will be corrected. Second, I never knew a girl named Karen Sue Beineman. I never had a conversation with her. I never took her to a wig shop. I never took her to my uncle's home. I never took her life. He was
a liar.
Yep. He was a horrible person. He is still alive.
Really?
He tried to appeal this 4 times. They have physical and circumstantial evidence tying the murders to him. However, Jane Mixer, the one who was found shot 2 times, someone was actually charged with that murder. It was a male nurse. They still tie it with John's story, so I don't know if it's uncertain or if they work together. Yeah. So that's a really interesting one, and I got down to the nitty gritty of all this information and was like, I don't really understand this, so I thought I'd make a note of that in there.
So was he ever convicted of all the other ones?
He was not.
Or they just didn't, since he was already there for life.
Yeah, and all of his appeals obviously have been turned over. He's a pig. He is in jail, claims he's innocent. My opinion, even if he was innocent of all these murders, he's still a disgusting pig who doesn't deserve to be out in the world. And
the fact that he had an uncle that was a sheriff and a previous frat brother that was on this police force that actually was investigating the murders he committed. I feel like he deserves it. But
right.
He was that type of murderer that too big for his own britches.
Oh, well, yeah, and the whole thing that he talked about, if a man wants to kill, he should, and he'll never be caught because there's no guilt. He sounds like a full-on socio-psychopath.
If I was going to murder people,
take note.
I would definitely not do it in my hometown where people know me.
And he did them all within, a few miles of each other. You can look at the map, and it's not far. It's disgusting. Because as I was reading down through here, and I was like, well, he was found guilty of that murder. But it said his sister and his mom always claimed he was innocent, and his aunt who...
They're probably the ones that made him into a weirdo.
Exactly. And his aunt was really broken up about it, and I started to feel this detachment and oh, what if he was innocent? He spent his whole life. And I'm like, he literally said that you shouldn't feel guilty and raped someone. No, he deserves everything he's getting.
And so it makes me think a man like that, with that type of attitude, it was probably raised by a woman who sucked, number one, but who... Well, she obviously wasn't picking him really well. She had 3 marriages before he was 9.
Right.
So she she obviously didn't portray good, healthy relationships in front of him, but she probably made him the man of the house after that. And
at 9.
Yeah. And who knows what her trauma was, but then to raise a boy who grew up to think he could do no wrong and have no guilt and creepy.
Yep,
You're good at creepy.
Thanks. This was a different kind of
little
creepy.
bit of dungeons, little bit of dopamine.
Yeah, I am the dungeon. You are the dopamine. So I'm sorry this one was dark. I cut a lot of detail out. If you want to dive in a little bit more and learn more about this, I know some people... They don't like the gore, but they're not as bothered by it. He was a sicko. And these bodies and these poor women were not treated well. And I cut back because I couldn't deal with it.
Right?
So.
I appreciate that.
I figured you'd like that too.
You know how I feel about scary things. Wow. I mean, I'm sure the Morrigan would take him out in battle.
Absolutely. And she would make him feel guilty. Which would then mean he'd get caught.
She would destroy him.
Oh, she would obliterate him. I hope she'd missed him like Rhysand does.
I bet she could. I assume that's...
But first, beat him up.
Druid magic.
Yeah. So, sorry again.
This was Dungeons and Dopamine Podcast, episode 50.
You did... Oh, right there. You can listen to us anywhere you stream podcasts or on YouTube.
You can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/dungeonsdopamine.
You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Insta, and Reddit.
You can also reach out to us on any of those social medias and also at dungeonsdopamine@yahoo.com.
Dungeons and Dopamine is edited and published by Argyle Pigeon Productions. The end. Thanks.
Good luck sleeping after that one.
We love you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.